Hello there, folks, and welcome to episode 2 of That Sixsmith Show, the only show where you get a different, alternative look at 6 of the biggest Newcastle United talking points from the week, and the only show where you get one complete Burke providing them. That would be me. I'm Andy Sixsmith, and I'm joined as ever by the man who's not averse to a Wetherspoon special himself every now and again, Mr. Kris Wallace. Kris, out of the studio, but we're still together.
We are, and do you know what it is? You couldn't have nailed that Wetherspoons any better because I love it, Wetherspoons, but I'm sure we'll get on to that a bit more.
Who doesn't love a Wetherspoons, mate? Who doesn't? Half the Newcastle squad, by the sounds of it. But yes, it's not a surprise that is going to be our first segment this week. If you are tuning in for the very, very first time, by the way, folks, this is the show that kind of, through my official job as a Premier League broadcaster, speaking to the players, doing press conferences, match days, etc., we bring up 6 alternative talking points, not the usual match previews, not the usual tactic talk, none of that nonsense. I say nonsense, it's all inherent stuff in football, isn't it? But 6 different talking points from a week. And the best thing is, well, it's kind of only half an hour. It wasn't last week, it was about 45 minutes, wasn't it, Kris?
Well, 45 minutes, we'll see.
It's about half an hour, so you can watch or listen to us really quickly, mainly because we can't be asked to make it any longer. Anyway, if that sounds all right, we're going to get right into it. And we're going to get right into it because there's only one place to start. I mean, when I spoke to Sandro Tonali the other week, he never told me that he'd be hitting Wetherspoons as soon as he did. The man's gone from a Savaloy dip to a steak club at Spoons. And I am absolutely here for it. If you haven't heard this news, 1, where the hell have you been and which rock have you been hiding under as a Newcastle United or a football fan? Because it's captivated the footballing world. And number 2, I mean, it's kicked off the biggest whodunit since the Mike Ashley years, I think, at Newcastle United. Sandro Tonali ends up in Wetherspoons, in Gosforth, Monday night, reserving a table for 7:45. Kris, where were you? How did you react when you saw that?
Where do we even start with this? Obviously, last week we had a discussion about sausage rolls and Savaloy dips. I didn't think this was going to be a running segment.
Every week we're going to be discussing Sandro Tonali and his eating habits, just in different guises.
Do you know what it is? When I first saw it, I thought it was a joke. I thought somebody had just printed it off and put it on a table.
Yeah.
But then, obviously, we see that awkward smirk, the awkward Tonali smirk, sat in a Wetherspoons with the Wetherspoon plates, the Wetherspoon carpet, the Wetherspoon clientele, then a professional Premier League footballer, an Italian international, just sat with his 3-plate special.
It's that, isn't it, though? If he was Greek or if he was German, wouldn't be as funny. It's the fact that he's Italian. It's the fact that he comes from I'm biased because Italian cuisine is my favorite cuisine in the world, but he comes from a world that created pizza, spaghetti carbonara, ravioli, and he ends up in Wetherspoons with, I don't know, Curry Club or whatever it is on a Monday night. And it's
what is it? It might be Curry Club on a Monday night. It might be.
No, man. Honestly, I've got to redo the intro now. I said steak club, didn't I? Shit. But it is that look on his face where it's kind of this kind of one smile that he's giving, where he's just thought, I don't know what the Italian is for this, but where the fuck am I? And how come the food's this fucking cheap?
I know.
And then he probably found out why it is that cheap.
Yeah, actually, I quite like a Wetherspoons. Do you know what it is? But it's probably because it is cheap.
It serves a purpose.
That's why I like it. Yeah.
It serves a fucking purpose, does Wetherspoons. And that is, for anyone wanting to wade in on the whole Spoons chat, Sandro maybe, I don't know, I haven't spoken to the lad since Monday. He might have fucking loved it. He might be making that an every Monday thing. In which case, for That Sixsmith Show, bonza. Fantastic news. We can react to that as one of our talking points every single week. But I'll level with you, Kris. Eddie in his press conference this morning, absolutely superb in the sense that it just has started off this, who's done it? Who told Sandro Tonali that Wetherspoons is haute cuisine? And also, sorry, just to throw another curveball at you, Who told him to go for ice cream in Tynemouth later on in the week?
Yeah.
Because
Just
he's
down from
been on a
Blue Reef
fucking
Aquarium,
food
wasn't
tour.
it?
Mental.
This is like Who's the Mole all over again, isn't it? Remember when there's a Newcastle Mole?
Bring Craig Hope onto this podcast right now. Let's get into it, and let's get Steve McLaren here as well, and Steve Bruce just to add spice to it.
So how done it? We've got like a Pierre Cluedo game going on, yeah, haven't we? It's the Geordie lads, isn't it?
Eddie said it's
the
not
Geordie lads.
Yeah,
has to be the Geordie lads, and by that I'm putting Dan Byrne, Sean Longstaff, and we're chucking Jacob Murphy in there as well. It has to be them three or a combination of them. Has to be.
Got to be. I mean, I'm putting Sean down definitely for the Tynemouth ice cream, but in fairness, that is a good ice cream stop in Tynemouth. He stops off.
No Minchella's like, but it's all
no,
right.
No, I mean, fucking hell, what is? But at the same time, for the Wetherspoons, I would go Jacob Murphy. I think that's got Murph written, or I can see him delivering that line as well and being like, you know what, Sandro, you're looking for somewhere nice. Wetherspoons, Gosford.
But that's not even the case, Andy. The thing is, right, fair enough, you're pranking somebody saying, I booked this nice table for you, go and enjoy yourself, you and your lass get yourself away. You still have to pull up outside and get through the front door before you're in there. So at what point did he think, am I in the wrong place?
Probably at the time that he opened the car door, I would have said.
He still went further? He kept on going?
But it's one of those situations, isn't it, though, fella, where if you've committed, you've committed. And Sandro Tonali, from what I've seen on the pitch and off it to a certain extent, when that man commits, he fucking goes in 100% to the force. And I reckon that has continued through the Wetherspoons.
Do you think he continued to the point where he ordered food and drinks? Or do you think it was like a flying visit where he sat down and went, oh, no, we better get out here?
You know what? Every single week, I'm going to be texting my producer going, is Sandro up for interview next week?
Yeah.
Because as soon as he is, I'm not asking him about his goals scored, his time on Tyneside so far, the latest win over Manchester City on Saturday night. None of that nonsense. I'm going to ask him, what is your pick from a Wetherspoons menu, my friend? And talk me through blow-by-blow account.
You could show him photos, so one of a Wetherspoons dish and one of like a Michelin starred dish, and go, which one's the better one?
Tell you what, if he goes for Wetherspoons,
what he likes it.
Can you imagine if he goes for a sirloin steak from Wetherspoons instead of a Heston Blumenthal special or something? Be sensational. It's just flipped his Italian haute cuisine upside down. But yeah, it's obviously got round the lads. Like, because Eddie this morning was very, he did laugh about it and was like, you know what? I've no idea. Like, he said he didn't know who it was. He did say it wasn't Matt Ritchie necessarily. So take that as you find it. But from a point of view of actually where he's been and everything like that, he just said he was just there for something to eat. Very, very innocent. Played it all down. Lovely stuff. Let's move on. Until, I don't know, Sandro ends up in Greg's next week. Or
he's already done Greg's. He's had that sausage roll.
That's a very, very fair point, mate. Yeah, where else is he going to end up? He's going to end up in, I don't know. Where could he end up?
What's that dessert place? What's that called? Everywhere.
Glow or whatever it is.
Something like that. You end up in some dessert place.
Where that's what we can guess next week. Where is Sandro Tonali? Which eatery is Sandro Tonali going to end up in?
He's probably been banished from Italy now, hasn't he? He's not allowed back.
I know. Well, what was everyone said at the start? Oh, he doesn't even want to be in Newcastle. He wants to be in Milan. I mean, pure bollocks anyway. The lad definitely wants to be in Newcastle. He loves it. He even told us that. But, you know, if he did want to go back to Milan, chances are closed door, Sandro. You're not going to get back in with that sort of cuisine test. So, yes, at number one this week, Sandro Tonali and his eating habits. You know what, Kris? I'm going to point this out right now. If the lad plays like he did against Aston Villa, he can go where the fuck he wants to go and eat.
Of course he can. I'll buy his Wetherspoons for the rest of his life if he wants.
Yeah, there's a rich man speaking. I mean, it's cheap as chips when you go once, but 126 times. It's starting to balance the books, isn't it? But,
it's 100 quid, mate.
Honestly, if he does produce those sort of performances week in, week out, Newcastle will win the league this year. And I'm not speaking like Stuart Pearce. That's a different prediction. Pearce has gone after Newcastle win the league, hasn't he, this morning on TalkSport? So
I saw it. I saw it, ignored it. I moved on slightly.
I can't say it was raised at the press conference this morning anyway. But anyway, so yes, Sandro Tonali's eating habits straight in at number 1 on the alternative talking points this week. Moving on to number 2, Kris, and it's something I asked Eddie about because being second or third reporter in, I mean, Razor didn't ask Eddie, actually. It was Keith who raised it about Sandro this morning. I mean, I was primed just to ask him about it anyway. But I did manage to ask him about this story about some bloke getting a tattoo of Eddie's face on his calf. Now,
another one.
Did you not see this earlier on the week?
No. So where's the tattoo?
It's on his calf, apparently.
Right, okay.
Yeah. So this is strange because it's almost a year to the day since the story broke that a bloke had Joe Linton's face tattooed right across his belly. And I remember asking Eddie about that at the presser last year. So I thought, fucking hell, this is weird. I'm going to have to ask him about it. I said, you know, like, what... I think we were talking about hero adulation anyway, in the sense that the fans have obviously taken to Sandro Tonali. And I just said, you know, like, speaking of adulation, I'm sure I asked you about this last year about Joe Linton. You know what's coming, don't you? And I could see he already knew it. He knew, he'd seen it. He goes, I know exactly what you're going to say here, Andy. I said, right, bloke's got your face tattooed on his calf. For someone who was like really arrogant and someone who was really, really like up themselves, then that would be one. But the weird dichotomy is for me that Eddie Howe is the complete antithesis of arrogance. He's the most humble bloke I think I've ever met in my entire life. So what the hell is that like for someone who's that humble to have?
Yeah. He probably feels a little bit awkward that he's defaced somebody's calf unintentionally.
It's a bit. It's very interesting, shall we say. But he did kind of make the point that whoever it is, this bloke, he's a very lucky man. You know, and it looked like a pretty decent representation. In fairness, the tattooist, from what I've seen of the video on the Chronicle, has done a pretty decent job. So well done for tattoo artist. Yeah, so Eddie said hopefully the lad's not too disappointed with it, but he doesn't quite know what to make of it, which I think is very.
If you look on the other calf, is Jason Tinderley just creeping around that one?
As long as there's a 2 meter difference between each leg. There has to be a 2 meter gap.
He's always close by. He's definitely on the calf and the other one.
There's a fourth official that follows him around everywhere, this bloke, making sure that his legs are 2 meters apart and one's behind the other. Yes, we'll get on to that because it wasn't really raised in the press conference as such this morning. We tend to focus on Tonali's food habits and tattoos and new signings as well, which we will come on to in a second. But yes, very, very interesting part of the press conference when tattoos are mentioned. Because usually
does this happen at any other club, Andy? Is there ever a conversation about one of your store signings going to like Weatherspoons and the manager's face being tattooed on somebody? Does this happen anymore?
Genuinely, I don't think it does. Like from my colleagues, from my reporters, I genuinely have never heard any of. Maybe it's just me. I don't know. Maybe they just don't ask the question. Maybe it does happen and it just doesn't get made a massive thing of. But I feel like if your star summer signing goes to Weatherspoons, you as the manager of that club has to answer a question about that in the press conference.
Of course.
And equally, if someone goes out and gets your face tattooed on his calf, you're probably going to have to answer it. That's just the way I work as a journalist. Not a very good journalist, just someone who likes a bit of a laugh in a press conference every now and again. So, you know what, mate? In answer to your question, I have never heard one of our Premier League reporters ask about a player ending up in Weatherspoons, and certainly not about a tattoo on them as well. So I think it is just Newcastle. But then again, I think we already knew that we're the only club like that.
Yeah. And you know what it is? It's not going to be the weirdest story that we hear throughout the season. There'll be another one. There'll be a few more.
It's my mission to find out the weirdest stories, mate, and ask Eddie about it every single week anyway. So I'll find something. Don't you worry about it. So yes, we're going to get a little bit more serious now because from Sandro's eating habits to Eddie's new number one fan, we're going to move across to another Geordie, another Newcastle United fan joining the club because Lewis Hall is on Tyneside as we speak right now. He's at the training grounds undergoing medicals. I have to laugh because I saw a tweet from a Manchester United fan turning around on Twitter, surprisingly, considering he tweeted, or X, or whatever you want to call it, and saying that how can Newcastle splash £28 million on a teenager, or big money on a teenager, and then politely being reminded that Manchester United have spent relatively big on Anthony Martial, Amad Diallo, to name just two, and carry on. I'm sure there's a longer list than that. But yeah, Lewis Hall, 28 million, obviously to loan with an obligation to buy next summer, which is brilliant from Newcastle's perspective, because naturally we had to be creative, to use Eddie Howe's phrase last week. I love it when Eddie gets creative. It leads to interesting things. And it also, seriously speaking, leads to Newcastle getting one of the most talented young fullbacks I think I've seen come out of England in a while. And I know he only played 12 games for Chelsea last season, but what he did in those 12 games, you pick up on little things, little nuances. And aside from being a supremely talented kid, he's versatile, which Eddie loves as a quality. But it's this word character that I'm going to use again. Yeah. He's a Newcastle fan. His brother, obviously, is a massive Newcastle fan, did the celebration playing for Chorley. I covered that game, weirdly enough, for BBC when he hit the winner in the FA Cup. It's incredible, like, to have another Newcastle lad playing for Newcastle, and one as talented as him. Newcastle have sewn up the England fullbacks for the next 15 years, potentially.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. You look at the right-hand side, bringing Livramento in, then you've got the left-hand side, and all you need to do to get any sort of indication on how good this player is look at the reaction from the selling club's fans. And if you look at social media now, the Chelsea fans are not happy that they've let him go.
No.
And it's always a great indication, whether you're buying or selling players, to get that reaction.
Yeah.
It's another Newcastle United signing. Like you said, it's a young lad that we're bringing in. We're looking at the future, but not just that. Somebody that can do a job right now. Yeah. And I think I said last week that maybe Eddie Howe's press conference last week, how he mentioned the likes of Trippier and Livramento can play on the left-hand side as a left-back, and might mean that we're not going to get that left-back target in. I was wrong. Eddie kept his cards close to his chest, and we've got one.
Don't feel bad. I think every single journalist in that room is wrong every single week when it comes down to Eddie playing his cut. He has us on a string, an absolute string. So it's...
But it's another one where the club have just gone under the radar once again, and that's how we do our business now. It's always the last moment that you think, oh, Newcastle are putting a bid in for this player, and it's all but done at that point.
You know what?
We've done it again.
I was going to tweet this out. Well, I'm still going to. But it's incredible how Newcastle United have become really, really, really fucking good at transfer business.
Really
Not
savvy.
just from the point of view of who the club is signing, but it's how that they're going about it as well. Yes, under the radar, like you rightly say, but they're not being held to ransom. They're identifying the targets. This is a very, very alien concept for any Newcastle United fan still out there, 2 years nearly on from the takeover. It's very, very odd indeed to see the club dealing in this strategic, straightforward, simplistic, but highly, highly efficient manner in the way that they're doing.
Andy, it's another professional thing which the club are doing, which we haven't done for a long time. Yeah. And that's what sums it up. And I love the fact that we're doing all of this quietly, because obviously anybody who's watching the documentary, it's highlighted on there that Newcastle tax exists, which it does. Of course it does. Yeah. And the last thing that we want is to get into likes of bidding wars with other clubs, because we're just going to get sucked into it. And you know what it is? We've done it the right way, and it's another fantastic signing. It's
interesting as well, mate, because, you know, Eddie normally, like you rightly say, keeps his cards close to his chest, certainly in press conferences. And, I mean, the news was pretty much out. So obviously, Lewis arrived on Tyneside this morning, or arrived at the training ground anyway this morning. But he was so open about it. I mean, he directly answered. Razor asked him straight away. He directly answered, said, you know, I'm not going to say too much about that. But, yeah, he's a player that is very, very versatile, very, very good. And Razor said, well, you know, are we in for him? And, you know, on a loan basis, is that what you meant by creative? And he went, yeah, it's a loan. And that is as straightforward as you're going to get, or as honest, not honest, I think that's the wrong word, but as open as you're going to get Eddie talking about transfers. The interesting thing from my perspective is, mate, the lad just signed a new deal at Chelsea, and they're losing. And I mean, I need to speak to our people who kind of cover Chelsea. Alex, who is a Chelsea fan as well, she covers Chelsea quite extensively down there to know more about Lewis from an academy standpoint. But like you say, the fans are absolutely fuming that they've let him go. And, kept the likes of Cucurella, who I quite like Cucurella as a player. But this kid, 18 years old and turning up trees, it's very, very, very impressive.
We've never done this before, Andy. When we're talking about buying young, yes, we may have brought young, but one for the future, as they used to class them as. I think Perez was classed as one for the future, then he was chucked right in the deep end. But it's so clever. Like, to buy up-and-coming English players and stealing them from the likes of Chelsea. Chelsea aren't no mugs. Of course they're not. Obviously, it's a player's request as well once they come to Newcastle. So we're doing something right.
Well, it probably got lost because it was towards the back end of the press conference. But Kieran Kelly from Macron asked, as he usually does, he's very, very astute, is Kieran, and he asked a really good question and said, did Chelsea reluctantly kind of operate with you, bearing in mind that they would be strengthening a rival? And there has been that talk about clubs at the top end of the Premier League not wanting to help Newcastle in any way, shape or form. And Eddie kind of paused a little bit, and I think there was a fair amount of reluctance there, but the player, like you say, pushed it through, wanted to be up at Newcastle, sees the project, obviously a Newcastle United fan as well. And like I said before, they've got Livramento on the right, Hall on the left. I mean, Dan Burn now, I think Dan will continue at left back for the foreseeable future. I think Lewis will probably be edged into it very, very slowly until he gets up to the pace of Newcastle. But to have Dan Burn as a backup centre-back, backup left-back, that's bloody brilliant in the Premier League. / continuing to start. It's tremendous to have. So the depth is starting to hit as well. So, looking at the window as a whole, obviously it's not finished, but it pretty much is from an incoming standpoint now for Newcastle. Eddie pretty much said as much this morning. I would go so far as to say that's a 9 out of 10 window from Newcastle.
Yeah, we touched on this last week, didn't we? We're addressing positions that we need to focus on. Left back was a huge one. I think everybody was in the same impression that we need to do something there at left back.
Yeah,
it's like I said, that they've done it and they've absolutely smashed it out of the park. I think now comes the hard part where you have to look at shifting players on. That's where it gets tricky.
Yeah. Well, we'll wait and see what they do. That all obviously leads to difficult decisions, because when you sign, decent players, then you've got 2 decent players per position. Then what the hell do you do? And as always, Eddie's going to be faced with some difficult decisions this week and at Manchester City. So moving on to point number 4. I mean, the big 2 that I'm picking out are Alex Isak against Callum Wilson and Harvey Barnes against Anthony Gordon. I think the midfield has to pick itself now. You can't split up that midfield considering they were so impressive against Villa. And that is really harsh on the likes of Longy. Obviously, Joe's out for a little bit. Elliot Anderson, I mentioned it last week. It's a little bit harsh on him considering the preseason he had. But you can't unplant those 3 from starting again against City. So I think that decision's made. It's the Alex Isak against Callum Wilson debate that is now rolling on. And Eddie talked at length about how both of them are just so incredible players for him, in the sense that Callum's going on the bench, but he comes on, scores, should have scored a second. Alex started. I mean, Alex Isak just looked like gold dust, I thought, against Villa.
Fantastic, mate. Honestly, I don't have enough time to talk about Isak, because we could be here for hours. We're mentioning, and this is something which we mentioned on the Monday night show quite a lot, that it's an absolute steal at 60 million quid. An absolute steal. That kid has got the world ahead of him, and he could be up there with the best. He's still unbelievably young, and he's got so much to give and so much to learn as well. Yeah. And he's only going to get better and better. And honestly, I'm so happy that he's ours. And I'm not looking at him playing for somebody else. He's ours. This is happening to us right now.
You know what? I remember reading an article when he joined, and someone called him a unicorn. And I was like, that's a fucking big thing to say, considering we live in a world where there's been like Ronaldo 9, Cristiano, Messi, Henry. But to call him that, you can see quality in a player, the way they glide over the pitch, their touch, almost an arrogance. And you know what? That was one of the first things I saw, because he's such a quiet lad. Every time I speak to him, he's so quiet. He seems to have really integrated well with the squad. He's very, very good friends with Joe Willock already. Sean Longstaff, he gets along with very, very well, to name but a few more players. They haven't sent him to Wetherspoons yet. But this time, I suppose. But he obviously is integrating himself very, very well in terms of a friendships basis, but you can see how much bigger of a player he is this season to last. And I saw that against Villa. He looks to have strengthened up a body. Everyone's banging on about Isri Konsa's mistake for that second one. Yes, it is a mistake. Of course it is. But it's a forced mistake.
Yeah.
It's a mistake, him knowing Alex Isak is on his shoulder, ready to go shoulder to shoulder. He's anticipated contact. Isak's been clever and stepped away from him. The contact hasn't come. Konsa's gone over, and Isak's in. And I mean, the finish is just purely impotent. It's incredible. But it's that physicality and that ability to run those channels and terrify defenders that right at the start when he was acclimatizing, he wasn't quite doing. Now you've got that kind of complete striker in there that can just seemingly do it all. He's good in the air. He's strong. His first touch is incredible. His awareness is amazing. His running off the ball is sensational. Pressing.
His speed is ridiculous, but it's so effortless as well. It's like he's not even trying. It's like how he just turns up to football games. Well, I know I'm good. I know I can only half-arse this. I don't even think we've seen him to his full potential yet. And it's just how he sits on the shoulder as well, on that last man, in any sort of breakaway. He's gone. Absolutely gone. I'm so happy he's ours. I just can't get over it.
It is insane. I mean, I'm not going to nick, hundreds of people's tweets probably from the weekend, but the amount of times I saw little surprised that he's, number 14, like models himself on Thierry Henry, because you can see it in him. You can really see it in him. Having said all of that about Alex, Callum, again, coming off the bench, if you're a defender and you see Callum Wilson with a point to prove coming off the bench, and just, I have met so many strikers in my career. Yes, they're all goal hungry. Don't get me wrong. Of course they are. They're strikers for a reason. But Callum Wilson takes it to the next level. I mean, that man, the number of post-match interviews I've done with him where he scored 1 or 2, and he's come off the pitch and said to me immediately, should have been a hat-trick, Andy. Should have been a hat-trick. I don't know how I've missed that. He did it again on Saturday. We spoke to him after the game, and he came in and was like, should have been 2. That's not a good save from Martinez. That's me missing that. And you're like, fucking hell. Apart from the fact I made a complete twat out of myself in the post. You'll like this, mate. Happens on a weekly basis anyway, me making a twat out of myself. So might as well go and do it live in front of however many million listeners or watchers on PLTV or whatever it was. So Callum's doing the interview. So I'm thinking, right, because our first half performance, we were good, but second half, we really dialed it in, didn't we? We were powerful. We ran the legs off everything. So I said to Callum, first half we were good. Second half, unbelievable. What's going on at half time? What's being said? And Cal looks at me. He's like, I don't know. I was outside, mate. Obviously, I forgot he was a fucking substitute, didn't I?
Yeah.
And he's outside warming up when I think I was trying to mean what was being said amongst the players, what was being said amongst the management on the bench before you went in. But fuck me, what a stupid question it was. And I believe journalists have a reason and a right to hold their hands up when they do something fucking stupid or ask something stupid. I mean, I do, like I said, pretty much every week, every press conference at least. But I definitely asked a stupid fucking question there. So, Callum, if you ever do see this, I did apologise straight after, but he laughed anyway. Apologies for asking you a stupid fucking question. But he was
You mentioned straight away that obviously he's a striker and he wants goals. Yeah. And do you know what it is? Going back to the premiere of the documentary, there was a question answer at the end of the 2 shows, which we saw, the first 2 episodes. Callum Wilson was one of the players. And they started talking about how, Callum, you finished top goal scorer last season. Yeah. His first thing was, well, you wouldn't have thought so showing those first 2 episodes because I haven't scored a goal yet. Because everything that they were showing, he was missing. Even though he had bagged tons of goals, he was unhappy that had showed him to miss every single chance. And it just shows you that kind of arrogance, but arrogance in a good way. It's confidence at the end of the day, and he's full of it.
It's elite mentality, and he's named me many better. I hesitate to call him this because he's not a backup striker. He's a number 1 striker. We've got 2 number 1 strikers, and that for a manager is incredible to have. But name me, while he's on the bench and Alex is starting, name me many better bench strikers in the Premier League.
It's the fact that they both give something completely different to each other as well. So a defender might be handling Isak which is never going to happen, but they might. But then think, oh well, we'll change it. There's Callum Wilson. Have fun with him.
Yeah,
Like, Eddie's got so much at his disposal at the minute. Like, he really does.
It must be brilliant, but also awful for a manager. Because Eddie spoke at length this morning about how difficult it is. Because obviously, goes way back with Callum as well. How difficult it is for him to put Callum on the bench because he knows what he can do for the team. He knows what he brings to the team. And to do that just goes to show, A, how impressive Alex Isak has been in training, but also obviously on a match day. But B, the fight for the places now at Newcastle is something that I can't remember having in so long.
Me neither. And you know for fine well Callum Wilson isn't going without Eddie Howe knowing that he wants to be playing. He's knocking on that door every single time he passes.
Absolutely. And rightly so. I love the bloke. I really, really love the bloke. I think he's tremendous to deal with, Callum. I don't think I've ever heard a cross word from him, really. He's always smiling, always laughing, always taking the piss. But as soon as he crosses that whitewash, that lad means fucking business. And honestly, I think he'll end up with 15 this season.
Yeah, I think the both will.
And if he can get 15 and Alex Isak get 25, Newcastle are on for an absolutely belting season because there's goals coming from midfield too. And then obviously set pieces. Well, not us necessarily because we don't score many from set pieces, sadly, but we should. Anyway, point being, let's move on from that. Very quickly, point number 5, because we are already over half now. Rotations.
As always.
It's gonna be less than last week, Matt.
You know what we need? We need a buzzer. We need a buzzer that just gives us a time limit. Then we'll move on.
Cut us off. Cut us off at half hour, and then
that's what we'll do. Next episode, I'll have a buzzer.
Great sound effects for next week. Point number 5: rotations. Genuinely, this is one of my favourite things this season. I know there is so much going on in the Premier League, signings, you name it. You know, what's happening on the pitch. Manchester City obviously winning the Super Cup. You can go on and on and on about what's happening in the Premier League at the minute. But one of my genuinely favourite things that has happened has been this new rule being brought in the technical areas and seeing the circus that developed in front of me in the technical area last week against Villa with Eddie starting. And he described it wonderfully, did the gaffer, after the game when he was like, I started up front and Jason dropped back to the back end of it. And he was describing it as if he was describing a football game, which was even better. And there were times where the fourth official, I can't remember who it was, kept going up and being like, Andy Kelly, it might have been, kept going up and was like, guys, I'm really sorry, but you're too close together again. And I just thought, fuck it. I never really asked much at the end of a post-match press conference because we deal with the managers and the players separately. But if something's been missed, I like to point it out. And I think Jacob Whitehead at The Athletic had asked about the technical area issue. And I just thought, fuck it, I need to ask a follow-up on this. I said to him, Eddie, are you guys good? You players have to go away and work on things. Do you two need to go away and work on your dovetailing? Do you need to work on your tactics? Or how is it going? And he laughed and was like, honestly, yeah, probably I do need to go away and work on that because we've got things to improve. So keep your eye on these tactics in the technical area because, honestly,
Andy, I've had an idea.
Okay. Go on. The heat map went down well.
This will work, right? So the heat map, do that.
Yep.
My next idea, I was sat there in my seat, and I'm Strawberry Corner, very front row where the standing section starts now. And I was looking around, then I saw them just obviously swapping around, and I thought, why don't we employ Jason Tyndall as a steward? And we give him an orange jacket, then he can just sit on the side of the technical area. Because there's nothing stopping that person to giving instructions. So why not just give him a high vis?
Why not exactly? Why not exactly? I would pay to see Mad Dog, Jason Tyndall, at the side of a technical area in a high vis, looking at the fourth official, just giving him a wink. And being like,
I'm thinking, Andy.
Now you can do. Now you can do. Look, it might not come off as an idea, Kris, but as a fucking idea, it's right up there with the very, very best of them.
It's content. That's what we are for.
Look, how do I introduce this show every single week? 2 weeks going. It's an alternative, different look at Newcastle United. You don't get much more alternative than employing Jason Tyndall as a steward so he can be closer than 2 meters to Eddie.
Get it done.
Brilliant.
Get it done.
Fucking love it. people don't tune into this show for my insight. They tune in for ideas like that, Kris, which you are the only man capable of. So fucking brilliant. Love it.
I'm not sure if that's a good thing.
I think it's outstanding. I'm definitely going to propose it to it. Maybe not in front of a camera, but away from the cameras, I might propose it to him, and see what he has to say about it. So I'll report back on that next time I see the main man. Just very, very finally, mate, point number 6, because I swear we are going to beat 47 minutes, which we were on last week, and we're on course. I'm going to reel off some things for you here. And I'm going to reel off some stats that are going to make you and every single Newcastle United fan that are watching this program, so all 6 of them, absolutely cringe. Okay? Here we go. They've just lost once in 31 games against us. Newcastle have never won in 18 games there. The last win there was 23 years ago. And Newcastle haven't won 2 straight games to open the season in 26 years. But I'm going to temper that with this. Manchester City might be the treble winners, but they are missing Kevin De Bruyne. They are missing John Stones. They are potentially missing Bernardo Silva. And they are missing Ruben Diaz as well through injury. They are coming off the back of a penalty shootout win in the Super Cup, which, while it gives them confidence, would have been knackering for them to have immediately jumped, not a fully tuned Manchester City because they didn't have a full pre-season, but to jump from Premier League to Super Cup back to Premier League to face an intense Newcastle United. I'm going to put this out there right now, even though Eddie wouldn't answer my question this morning when I put this to him. I don't think Newcastle fans should ever have been more optimistic to go to Manchester City and get a result and get a win. I mean, would you agree or not?
Yes. The reason why I agree is because we are absolutely mint at the minute. That is why I agree. No, honestly, Andy, I said last week before the Villa game when we done this show that how important getting off to a good start was because of the next 2 fixtures being City and Liverpool. Yeah. I wasn't expecting that sort of performance against Villa. We've been going thinking it's a really tough game to start with. We're probably on par with each other. It's all level playing field at the minute. No, we just going to absolutely hit them out the park. Yeah. Why not play Manchester City? I know that the last couple of times I went there was 2-0 last season, and the season before that might be 5-0.
Later in the season, when Manchester City start, they are a back end of the season sort of team. They're not really strong starters. They never have been. You know, I just wonder whether it's now the right time just to hit them with the injuries. Because, I mean, look, De Bruyne is probably the best player in the Premier League, as far as I'm concerned. Right up there, certainly with Haaland. And obviously Bruno. But apart from that, missing him, but missing John Stones is huge at the back.
Of course it is.
Missing John Stones is massive because he is probably, for me, one of, if not the best defender in the Premier League right now is John Stones. He's right up there. Fantastic, the improvement he's made. So to miss him, huge. To miss Bernardo Silva, potentially, that's not been confirmed, but he is carrying a knock. To miss him is even worse. And I just think all of that coupled together and the fact that, like you say, we're playing some good stuff at the minute and we're intense and we'll be bang up for this to make a statement as well. You
have to remember as well, Andy, the last time we were there, it wasn't how good Manchester City were. We just couldn't finish with dinner. The amount of chances that we had, and we just could not find the back of the net, and that was an issue at that time of the season for us. Maybe we just need to bring Rolando Aarons back, because last time we won there, it would have been when Aarons was there in the Cup. Obviously, he hasn't Premier League games we haven't won, but we won 2-0. I think it was him and Richie. I think he scored. Won 2-0. Yeah. So get Aarons back, whatever he's doing these days. Bring him back.
Drag Aarons back. Put Jason Tyndall in a high vis. It's all coming together, mate. It's the perfect stew.
Honestly, I think it'll be a great game. And whether or not we'll go out and get 3 points is a different story. But you know for fine well that we will be giving it our all. We're not going to go back and sit there and defend. We're going to go and give them a game. And that's all that we can ask for at this moment in time.
I remember, and this is where I have to apologise to quite a few people, I watched that the 2-0 win back in March, I think it was. I watched that in the Nottingham Forest press room, and I pissed a lot of people off that day because I was watching Callum miss a chance. I think Joe Linton missed a bit of a sitter. The chances just went and went, and I was loud in that press room. So I can quite easily apologise to every person in that Forest Was it Forest or was it Wolves? Might be Wolves, actually, Wolves it was. It was down at Wolves. And literally there were people just glaring at me because I was so fucking loud. Like, the usual sort of shite, put the ball in the back of the net type thing. But hopefully that's not going to be the case this time. We look razor sharp. And I don't think, and Eddie did dodge the question a little bit. He said, look, I don't know whether the fans should be more optimistic than ever. We always want the fans to be optimistic, he said. But he did concede. This is we're playing really well. The factors are there, but Manchester City are Manchester City. And in reality, they could be missing 5 of their best players and they'll still be able to put out a starting 11 that is better than 85% of the teams in the Premier League. So, let's not kind of get too carried away, but I am very much looking forward to watching that tomorrow night from afar.
I'm really looking forward to it. And I couldn't even tell you last time I'd done that against Newcastle v Man City, especially away from home. And I think, it is, we're still in this point where we still class this as a free hit. So as long as it's a decent performance, it's fine. Like we'll get on with it. We'll go to the next one. It's fine. But I'm pretty optimistic for this one. I might come back and eat my own words, but I think we're looking at a draw here, minimum, and I think it'll be a really good performance from the lads. And like you said, the fact that we've got so many decent players to impact from the bench now as well is always a bonus. So as long as we can keep it close until the last 10-15 minutes of the game, then that game can go in any direction if it's 0-0 at that point.
Absolutely. No fear, mate. No fear. As Eddie Howe would say, bloody hell, it's rubbing off, spending every press conference with him, coming up with his cliches now. But yes, no fear at all from Newcastle United. And no fear at all that we're going to go over 47 minutes because 41 minutes is ticking by and it's time to wrap things up. Happy days. Which, to be fair, all I'm saying is I can't wait for the next episode just to find out where Sandro Tonali has been for his latest evening meal. So wherever they want to send him, crack on, and we'll see what we can get out. Maybe a KFC or something. I don't know. It's not Newcastle enough, is it? Let's face it. But yes,
it needs to have that Geordie touch on it, doesn't it?
The TFC.
Well, that's Spoons and Geordie. So hang on.
Geordie. Wetherspoon's adopted as a Geordie eater. It is now. Now that Sandro Tonali's gone. Anyway, but yes, that'll just about do us, folks. Episode 2 of That Sixsmith Show in the can. We didn't even mention the documentary. Well, we did in passing, but anyway, I'm sure we can come back to that.
But there'll be more on that. Yeah.
Exactly, mate. But listen, the aim of the show is to keep going until at least the Champions League. So we're well on form for that. But seriously, folks, keep watching, keep listening, keep subscribing, of course, to the superb GallowgateShots. He's been Kris Wallace. I've been Andy Sixsmith. This has been That Sixsmith Show. We will see you in 7 with fingers crossed, hopefully 2 wins out of 2 on the board for Newcastle United. Catch you soon.